Hey, bonjour, farm friends. Year in review so far. My goodness, what a train ride, more of a train wreck it has been. Started out wet and cool and stayed that way till mid-May, and then it turned dry, really, really dry, and then really, really hot and dry. And whatever precipitation did come in was sporadic. Some folks down near St. Chrysostom got wet like you wouldn't believe all spring. Couldn't get a crop in at all. Whereas the rest of us were able to sneak crops in between the clouds. And then as soon as summer really did hit in earnest, it just got so hot and so dry. Whereas last year, if we think of last year on, it was August 9th, if I remember right, somewhere between 120 and 170 millimeters in the area. So we had to get ready for a deluge, monsoon. So we got to be ready for it all with climate change. So we spent a lot of money on the drainage last year, and we're drilling a well this fall, getting ready for more drought to come. Sign of the times, I guess.
Welcome, everybody, to the Farm to Food podcast, being recorded here at the studio at the Expo Orangetown, which is in the Châteauguay Valley, just southwest of Montreal. My name is Hugh Maynard. I'm your host of the program, as well as I'm also the publisher of The Gleaner, which is the local community newspaper in the region, which is also the producer for the podcast, so that we can highlight the agricultural sector that is very important in the valley, as well as the agri-food component of it, which is food production, which is food processing, and of course consumption at the other end. The Gleaner has been around since 1863, served the area for a long, long time, and in the context of being a community information provider, bringing more news and information to the community, the podcast is an add-on to the newspaper, the website, the app, which are already available for subscribers and for people who want to read about the valley. But also, the podcast is a way to reach out to beyond the territory to neighboring communities and the consumers in Montreal. Everybody has an interest in food. Everybody has an interest in where it comes from and how it's produced. And so melding the two together, agricultural production, agricultural processing, and of course the consumption end, and that is farmers markets, that's supermarkets, that's now online shopping is going to be a coming thing. So there's always lots to talk about, whether it's the weather, whether it's the state of the crops, whether it's how food is produced and how it's sold. And of course, we'll add in a component about how it's consumed, recipes, seasonal produce, and all those kinds of things. So every 2 weeks, we're going to be hosting this show. We'll have some interesting guests involved in agriculture and agri-food and food production. And we hope that you'll join us on that basis and help us with the program to grow. We are a non-profit organization, and we have charitable status. So if you ever visit our website, we'll be pestering you for donations. We need to make this financially viable in the long term, and we appreciate the support from the Government of Canada and other organizations that have helped us carry out this project to get it started. So for our first episode, we're going to put a focus on the fall harvest. And I'd like to welcome now Sarah Rennie, who is the news editor of The Gleaner and covers all things agriculture and agri-food in the community, and also involved with Glenelm Farm, which is a producer of organic vegetables in Elgin, which is part of the Châteauguay Valley. And welcome, Sarah.
Hello. And
we're going to talk about the weather. It's been a difficult growing season for a lot of farmers. And so how has 2025 been for the weather in the Châteauguay Valley?
As you say, it has been a difficult season. So far, things started out very cold and very wet in May. Some farms were actually able to get some of their things planted in a little bit of a window. And then it got very cold and it got very wet. And so they had baby plants that were coming up that were not doing very well. And then others who planted a little bit later, then were dealing with very wet, very cold conditions again before we got into June, and suddenly it became very hot and it stopped raining.
And also, in the dryness and the wetness, there's been a lot of patchiness, right? Some areas got rain, some didn't. Some neighbors got rain, some didn't. It's had a dramatic impact on the outcome of the season.
Mm-hmm. The valley is interesting in the sense that you can actually watch rain fall in your neighbor's yard, and you're sitting there wondering why you're not getting any rain. It can actually be that limited in who gets rain, who doesn't get rain. The same thing sort of happens when it's not such a happy occasion. People get hailed. One farm gets hailed, the other farm doesn't. But certainly this summer, we all desperately needed rain. And for some people, it fell, and for other people, it has been bone dry.
Right, and the average, which is good and bad, but the average has been 65% of normal rainfall, June, July, and August. So that's a considerable deficit. How does that line up with the temperature, which is the other factor in weather and crop production?
Mm-hmm. This summer was record-breaking hot, actually. We had 8 heat records that were broken at St. Anisette. That's where Environment Canada has their weather station. We had 22 days over 30 degrees, which is just a lot of hot days for people to have to try to manage.
There were some stretches when it was pretty hot, well above 30.
Yeah. And it started in June, and that stretched all the way in towards the end of August.
So it's been hot, it's been dry. Those are not necessarily the best conditions for growing crops. So what's the impact been on some of the crops in the valley this 2025 season?
So I've spoken to a couple of farmers across the valley, a couple of different farmers. One of them grows apples, and there's a vegetable farmer. And then I spoke to Jackie Lamb and Sean McNamee from Lamont Farms in Godman, Chester. They grow corn and soy. They're certified organic for their crops. And then they're sheep farmers as well. They were saying that corn's actually their weakest link when it's hot.
Our farm, we have a lot of clay, so clay holds on to moisture, so that's like a blessing sometimes, and sometimes less of a blessing. But corn is thirsty, and during its growth stages, if it doesn't get what it needs at a critical point, the plant is going to just not produce, say, the top inch or the top inch and a half of kernels. Those will be like abandoned. Soybeans do the same, but they're a lot more resilient. Yeah, corn is usually the one that you need a great year to have a great yield of corn. You can have a medium year and still have a decent yield of soybeans.
Okay. And so then this year we had a pretty wet spring. People were late onto the field, late planting, those sorts of things. So is that sort of having a residual impact now too? Late start, stress on the plants from the beginning?
Probably. We were like 10 days past our prime day. So that's not the end of the world, but it's for the first time in 14 years that we've planted corn in June. And we were borderlining it.
And actually for us, it was slightly better that we waited just because it was so wet. Those who were able to get in earlier and then it was rainy and cold, their corn really suffered coming up. So in that regard, it was actually pretty good that we waited, but we'll see what we get.
Yeah, we'll see what we get. So we'll see. We don't aim for the best ever yield. We aim for a steady yield. So if we can just get to that point, that'd be even great. But we talk about it. We've been talking about it a lot more. And with the price of organic grain corn and the sometimes questionable yield, it's not something that is going to be a for sure in our rotation for the rest of our farming career. Like some years, if the price isn't there, we just might really downsize the acres and things like that. I'm sure we're going to start to see different crops coming up in the valley that maybe haven't been seen for a couple generations, or that we're only maybe seen more at like southern latitudes. So even though we're corn and soybean area, 2 generations ago, soybeans were not even grown here. So there's going to be an opportunity out there for people to make mistakes and maybe win.
Reports on winter wheat, which is wheat that is planted in the fall, goes dormant over the winter and then has a good head start in the spring. Yields there look pretty good, and certainly watching the combines in the field take off a good amount of grain and straw. So that was different from corn.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and people have had some cuts of hay. So I think, in that sense, I think farmers are incredibly good at adapting. So I think nobody's written off this season. I think everything will be fine. There have been some more interesting challenges for some farms than others, obviously, when dealing with heat. So if you look at vegetable farmers, for example, I talked to Jess Elwell from the Jardin de la Résistance, which is an organic vegetable farm in Ormstown. And, she was talking about just the strain on the actual workers.
One of the big consequences of it being droughty is that it takes a person out of the field who could be weeding or planting or even doing office work, and they are running around almost full time, like setting up irrigation lines, fixing irrigation lines, fixing sprinklers, because we can only irrigate so much at one time because we only have so much pressure in our tank for the well. And so, it basically takes a person out of the field. Like, otherwise be doing something else, which is crazy because we're a small team and we got lots and lots to do. It just adds like an enormous burden of work to our already big burden of work. Another thing too is that we lost a lot of direct seeded stuff this year. Like, we would seed carrots or we would seed herbs directly in the ground, and if they don't stay wet, they come up and then they die or they don't germinate properly. And so we've had to reseed things multiple times, which also adds to a lot of what we already have to do. We also have a bunch of greenhouses on the farm, and in a greenhouse you can't water for 3 hours at a time. You have to water just a little bit at a time. And so it's a lot of work for the pump too, to be constantly watering the greenhouses and then watering in the field. And then also, like, a lot of things, it's not good to water at night because they get sick if the leaves can't dry out, and you can't water everything overnight either. It's a big puzzle. And it's been hot as F. And so it's not just a drought. It's like a drought with like heat wave after heat wave after heat wave. If it was like 15, even 20 degrees and dry is different than it being 40 degrees and dry as well.
Yeah. And then, inside the greenhouses too, you're managing heat.
Oh my God. Like, don't get me started about the heat. It was just like, it was like this. I think this was the first summer in my 16 years of farming where I was like, maybe I'm getting too old for this. Maybe I need to cut back. But now the temperature has dropped. I'm like, oh, never mind. It's not that bad. It's hard for morale on the team. Everything just seems like a way bigger deal than it should be. And even if we start early, like there were a few days where we're like, oh, we'll start at 6 a.m. and stop at 3. Like, our employees go home, but we don't go home. We're like, oh, we'll just work till 5 anyway because there's so much to do because we don't work as fast when it's so hot either. But it's been really rough. I mean, our vegetables are still gorgeous. We've still managed to pull. We've had a really good team, but we've pulled it off. But it hasn't been easy this year, for sure. The heat is really brutal, and it's dangerous too. Like, we often have to tell our employees to we're after everybody take breaks all the time. It's quite something.
So are you guys adapting then? Like, obviously, last year you had to adapt. It was so wet.
So wet. We were sump pumping our fields. Well, even the spring, right? Like, we were sump pumping water out of our field this year, out of our onions, so we could plant them. I mean, luckily we had such a nice wet spring because everything was so luscious and beautiful, In May, we were like, wow, it's going to be a great summer. And then it didn't rain for 2 months. Farmers adapt. That's what we do. When you farm, there's just so many variables that, like, you're always adapting to something, whether it's not having enough employees, whether it's having too dry, too wet. But we're lucky to have a well. We don't work with irrigation ponds, and we have a really good well that doesn't dry up. And, you just do it, I guess. I don't know. I think you have to be a certain kind of stubborn to be a farmer in the first place. And so you just do what you got to do, and that's it. I mean, maybe we'll get a bigger pressure tank so we can water more things at once. That's at some point, but I don't know. And maybe next year we'll get flooded again. Who knows? But it's definitely like we've seen the weather change since in the last 16 years. Like, when we first started farming, you'd get maybe like a day or two of 35 in the whole summer. Yeah. And so, it's a new game for sure. But whatever. We'll get through it.
So in terms of all harvest, like the stuff that's coming now is looking okay, or is it showing signs that it has had a rough go?
It's looking okay. Our carrots didn't come up very well, so we're going to be short on carrots. We'll have to buy them from another organic farm. Our melons too. We had beautiful melons up until we realized that there was a drip tape line broke in 3 of the rows, and so they hadn't been watered, and so they just died. And so we only had melons and cantaloupe for a week and a half about in the baskets, which is too bad because it only comes once a year, and they're so good. One of the big advantages of having no precipitation is that things don't get sick. So like a lot of the fungal diseases that we usually are afraid of this time of year, we're like our cabbages and all of our fall brassicas are looking gorgeous because they don't have alternarios yet, which they often show signs of already. We've been able to get in and weed them on time and fertilize them on time because it's not super wet. I mean, we'll see when we pull our turnips and radishes out of the ground if they're like hollow on the inside because they haven't been watered, or if they're super spicy. But I think, especially now that it's cooled down, it should be okay. I mean, we definitely lost stuff over the summer, but the fall is lining up to be all right.
And also for things like blueberries, apples, which are sensitive to water because they're a fruit. It's been difficult for some farmers, particularly on what we call the Covey Hill, right, where it seems to have been drier than in other areas.
Mm-hmm. Blueberry season went well for most people, but for some it was very quick. The apples are looking good. The trees are heavy right now with apples. But the earlier varieties were smaller and they were a little bit drier.
Right. And is that because of the frequency or the occurrence of rain at a particular time?
I think it might also just be that a lot of the orchards are, if they are irrigating, they're irrigating their younger trees with the newer varieties of apples. And the earlier apples tend to be, some of them tend to be older varieties. Those trees likely aren't irrigated. But I've heard that even the early ginger golds this year, which is a really good early apple, crisp and very good flavor, were a little bit smaller and they were a little bit dry. So I was just speaking with Fred Stevenson of Stevenson Orchards in Franklin. And they're one of only a handful of orchards across Canada that are growing the Sweet Tango variety of apples. And they're renowned locally for this tangy sweet cider or juice that they press. Coincidentally, I just learned Stevenson started making juice in larger quantities in 1975 because their apples were small due to a dry year. They've definitely kept going. And now they make up to 800 gallons per weekend at high apple season. So I chatted with Fred a little bit about how dry this year has been and, the impacts that it's having on apple growers in the area.
I'm here with Fred Stevenson of Stevenson's Orchards in Franklin, and we're chatting a little bit about this season and how dry it has been.
Yeah, so very dry. We were probably a little luckier than other areas in some of the rainfall that did occur, which was far and few between, but still, there's no question there's many areas that are hit by all the dryness. Good sections, bad sections. Everybody will have their pieces that work and pieces that don't work. Probably hasn't been this dry since 1975. Talking to my father. Yeah, the other issues will be storageability, how the fruit's going to store, and we won't know that till we're in it, unfortunately. So, yeah, irrigation could never keep up to this, not in your wildest dreams. So even the ones that were aggressive that had the irrigation on early before it got dried out too much, it's definitely showing.
Mm-hmm. And so we had a colder and a wet springs.
Yep, we did. Nobody ever would have thought we would dry out that fast, but we did. So yeah, the whole farming sector is going to be hit by this one. There isn't anybody that's not going to be touched this year, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And so you irrigate some of your apples, like the newer varieties?
Yeah, we irrigate some, but it's like this. But we had July and August were just beyond what you could do a little bit of maintenance, go around rotating your sections, which you normally do when you drip irrigate, but you can't keep up to this amount of evaporation and heat that we had. It just sucked the moisture right out of everything.
So do you think it was as much the heat, or was it the fact that we weren't getting any rain?
Of course the heat, but then if you have no rainfall, when you have that kind of heat, the two together are not a good combination. great for growing, but if you don't get rainfall, it doesn't work. And this season has demonstrated that.
So are you seeing, some people have said the apples are a little bit smaller. Some people have said the earlier apples especially were pretty dry.
Yeah, if you didn't thin properly, your fruit size is way down. Where thinning was done properly early, fruit size is decent. Where we aggressively thinned on some of the younger trees just because I didn't want a heavy load on them for this year, they turned out okay. Then the big question for apples is what kind of a crop we're going to have next year. This is when the trees set their fruit buds, end of August into September, and we're dry. We'll see what's there after the fruit's off and what we have for return buds.
Right, so you're actually looking ahead to next season now.
Yeah, what are we going to have? What are we going to have for fruit buds? Once we get the fruit off, start walking around looking at fruit buds to see what is resetting and what isn't. Could very well be where the trees were really stressed and had too many apples on them. They may blank out. They may not produce a fruit bud for next year.
So you're seeing a lot of stress then in the orchards?
Yeah, there will be a lot of stress. And we'll see how this fall goes. If we go into dormancy dry, it can relate into a lot of problems next spring.
So you're looking forward to what's being predicted right now, which is a wetter fall, later fall.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope it is wet. We're going to need it. I know the cash croppers will be happy. But no, we definitely have to reestablish the water table before we freeze up. Otherwise, next spring is not going to be cute. Mm-hmm. We'll see.
So is there anything positive about high heat, dry temperatures in the summer? Disease was down, maybe? You guys didn't get hail.
No, but it was around. Well, generally, high heat and lots of sunshine can translate into a lot of food into the leaves, but it can't get moved if the tree doesn't have water to move it. So that's a toughie. It makes a lot of food, but it won't necessarily get moved around if there's not proper water in the tree system between your xylem and phloem. So we'll see. A lot of unpredictables.
So is there anything you can do to adapt? Is there anything you can do mid-season to adapt other than put more irrigation in, bigger pumps?
Pretty hard to combat this. The only thing that would work in this weather is sprinkler irrigation, which takes a lot of water. You'd use up your bank of water that you'd use for drip to do everything in a small section. So no, you could add another drip line, but it'll help. Everything will help, but when you're this dry, it's a toughie.
So how much rain do you think we need at this point?
Oh, that's a good question. We'd have to look to see how much deficit we're in. We must be at least July, we had next to nothing for inches. August, maybe can we have 2 inches total? I'd have to see what the...
I think we got one really good rain in.
Yeah, it's kept us going, but to replenish the reserve, you're talking about many inches. And of course, we don't want it all at once either.
No, we need we need a wet fall.
Just a tranquil, like with the last one we had was quiet and just calm, and it just rained. We just needed it to repeat itself.
So we need rain.
Yeah, we need rain. We do. That's the only solution to it.
Apples must be one of the only crops where you're looking right now at next year.
Oh, we start looking at next year when we're in July. Yeah, we started looking at that in July when we started drying out. The whole questions and nutrients that we could apply on the trees to help them through this to also build up reserves to produce fruit buds for next year. And we'll see if that produces any fruit for next year.
Right, so that this could be 2 or 3 years then of...
It's anybody's guess. We'll see. There's a lot of factors that play in. Like I said, if we do start getting rain before it freezes up, they may be all right to reset. We'll see. We'll see.
All right. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Right, lacking in water because even irrigation can't keep up with that through a whole orchard.
No, and as Jess at the Jardin La Résistance will tell you, there's nothing like rain.
Yeah, everybody who has a lawn knows that, right? As soon as you have some rain,
Exactly. Yep.
got to go out and cut it. So it's been, some have been good, some have been not so good. It's put a lot of stress on the production systems, the workers, as you say, particularly with the heat. Generally, how is this impacting farmers in terms of the market, the supply, in terms of what they'll have to sell? There's also the question of livestock in barns that have had to, our barns are made for both summer and winter, right? So we're just starting to grapple, I guess, with the extremes that we've been facing of 30-degree heat on a more frequent basis. What's the situation for farmers?
Well, Jackie at Lamont Farms, where they raise sheep, was saying, they've had to install large fans into their barns. So she says in the summer when it's very hot, just trying to keep the air moving in the barns, it's very expensive. So she was saying their expenses skyrocket. But the alternative, and having air that doesn't move within the barn, is that the animals just get sick and then your vet costs increase. So having a healthier animal is always a better outcome. Actually, I talked to Jackie and Sean from Lamont Farms about that very thing.
I think of all the things we're doing right now, that's probably the biggest worry. You're worried about them getting enough water, getting heat stroke, just being too hot, too stuffy. So over the years, we've actually been putting a lot more fans in the barns. We just find we're getting more and more hot days every single year, hot days with no wind. So there's no overleaf in the barn. So now putting fans in has helped immensely. Yeah.
We can say our sheep had better ventilation than we did for a few years. They had more air movement, but we didn't have air conditioning at that point. But definitely, if we put in these big fans, yes, it was good. The animal health and bien-être animal really was very good, but significant electricity bill change. I would say it went up by, when we're running the fans 24/7 for July and August, it probably changes the bill by $700. But our vet bill has never been lower, and our death rate for stress is extremely low.
We actually haven't lost anyone in the heat this year, which says a lot about our fans.
Yeah. And our crew that's outside, they're fine. I'm not worried about them in heat at all.
We also manage that differently too, in the fact there's our different paddocks where they go, and we specifically kept certain sections that have more shade, more trees. We see that week of 35 to 40 degree weather coming up. Okay, we're going to save that for that period. And I think that's really helped a lot too. Probably the weakest link right now for the animals is the water. Right now they have to come back from their paddocks all the way to the barn to drink. So
it's a September 2025 project. It's going to happen. Is get water so they don't have to walk. And so it's there. So it's another stress reducer. That's the number one goal for animals, I think, especially for us, is low stress is going to be a healthy animal. And of course, they're going to have stressful times every now and then. They don't have to worry about water. They don't have to worry about shade. It's there. And they can just go to it.
Right. And this might sound a little bit ridiculous, but of course, everybody thinks of sheep. They think of wool, that sort of thing. So I automatically go to, oh my God, these must be hot little animals. Naturally.
Yeah, well, wool is also an insulator against the sun. Sheep get sunburned. So that's happened too sometimes. Their first big sunny day outside afterwards, they can get a little sunburned. But the wool also acts as an insulator, and A goal on our pasture land is having more vegetation, higher vegetation, which can lower the difference of the soil temperature by 10 degrees compared to a very much grazed down field versus a field with 12 inches plus of vegetation. The soil temperature difference can be 10 degrees. So if they're lying down on a piece of ground that's 10 degrees cooler than an exposed piece of ground, that's also good. Not perfect at it, but it's a factor for sure when we're planning out things.
It definitely sounds like you're having to spend more time though and energy on planning.
Yes, we have to be conscious of the heat. We have to plan for it every year now.
So there's been a lot of adaptation, things that farmers are doing. At Lamont Farms, for example, they've also ensured that their animals have shade because, of course, sheep like to graze. So they're out, they're in the field, so they're being exposed to the heat. They need space where they can get shade, and they also need water. And so she was saying that it's a stress on the animals if they have to come back to get water. So that's something that they plan on doing, is finding ways for them to be able to get water out to their animals a little bit more effectively.
Which farmers in Western Canada often do because it's very dry in many places, but it's not something we're accustomed to.
No, and I think most farmers actually this summer were perhaps caught a little bit off guard by drought conditions because it has been so wet, and it has been, we've been getting consistent rains for the last few years. Last year it was so wet that, Jess at the Jardin said that they were caught off guard. They weren't planning for a dry summer.
Right. So as we look into the fall, it's been a bit of a stressful season. Is it more stressful to write the news, or is it more stressful to harvest stubby carrots?
I mean, it's stressful, but I think that if you talk to any farmer, especially any seasoned farmer, they would tell you, well, it's the weather and you just adapt. And I think there are fewer people in the world who are better able to adapt than farmers. But certainly this year, there's, I've heard at the farmers markets, for example, the number of people who come up and they're just like, our tomatoes will not turn red. Yeah, there's just a lot of varieties that are just so susceptible to any kind of stress. They experience anything and they don't do as well.
So talking about the impact on consumers, they can expect stubby carrots, is that it?
No, I think the major producers will be doing fine because they have the capacity to make sure that they're getting water where they need water, when they need water, those sorts of things.
Vegetable producers that have hundreds of acres of certain types of crops.
And they do very limited kinds of crops at once. You don't see a lot of these, giant vegetable producers who are doing 40 to 50 different kinds of varieties of vegetables like our local market gardeners are doing.
So what about other impacts for consumers' prices, supply? I know we're in a global economy, so you can bring stuff in from the US or from Peru or Mexico and other places. But on a local basis, as you say, from the farmers markets and other places where they would sell, any impacts that you've seen?
I'm not sure we're seeing all that many impacts just yet. The farmers markets, for example, there have been blueberries, there were strawberries. The seasons were maybe a little bit shorter for some farms, but most of the products have been there. Asparagus season in the spring was a little bit tricky just because of how wet it was. But otherwise, I'm not sure we're seeing those impacts just yet.
So coming up next month or so, it's looking pretty much the same. Sunny, not too much rain, but then later in October, the forecast is for quite a bit of rain, which is not a good time because the season's over, but it's also harvest time.
Mm-hmm. So that'll add a whole other level of stress. In recent years, I can remember years where people had corn still, going at Christmas because it was so wet. They weren't able to get into their fields. A wet fall is not going to help very much either. And actually what we've been experiencing just very recently was a dramatic shift between very warm nights throughout August into September, where the nights have started to get very cold very quickly. And so that's having an impact as well.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. Wish you all the best with the harvest, and we'll talk again soon. Next up, we have Callan Forrester, our community reporter with The Gleaner, talking with Benoit Coulombe of Ferme Giroflée about the agritourism activities being offered at his farm.
Hello, everyone. My name is Callan Forrester, and today we have Benoit Coulombe of Ferme Giroflée in Hemmingford with us. Today we're here to talk a little bit about agritourism, how this past summer season was, and just the role of agritourism in our community. So Benoit, I would love it if you could maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the products that you offer, a little bit about your farm. I'd love to hear what you've got going on.
Okay, hi people. I'm from Giroflée Farm, from Hemmingford, south of Montreal in Montérégie. So we grow lot of veggies and blueberries organic. We do agrotourism at the farm. We do U-pick of lot of veggies and blueberries, and we do distribution in the grocery, directly in the grocery. So mostly 95% is for distribution of our produce.
Yeah, you're an agrotourism location. You have this U-pick. I'd love to know how this summer has been for you and how it's been with people coming to visit, what that's been like this summer.
This summer was really wonderful. A lot of people came at the blueberry field for U-pick. I was impressed about the flow of the people. The yield was very good, and the taste of the fruit too. That was a better year in U-pick since the beginning of the farm. We already have 11 years of farming in Maynard.
Great to hear that it was such a good year. For you, what is it about agrotourism that is exciting?
We do agrotourism because we can meet people directly every day. So we know them a lot. Every year they come back at the farm, and some people came every week for tasting new varieties, and they are with us since the beginning. They call them VIP people, and we give them sometimes a special variety to pick.
I noticed you do really unique products on your farm, like the cucamelons and the peppers that you do. What is it about this sort of produce that interests you? Because it's not stuff that you see everywhere.
In my specialty, my whole career, I was an agronomist department, and I was in research and development, and a teacher too in horticulture. So I was always searching for new varieties, for innovation, and I won't bring that in my farm because it doesn't make sense sometimes to grow something they are not tasty. The veggies are not tasty, but with good shelf life. So I was looking for some new production to put on the market for make taste, beauty in the kitchen, and so cucamelon was a first try, so a big challenge. After that, we try mini eggplants, so they are very beautiful, and at the farm now we do 25 type of different veggies, so all different, and lot of hot peppers, sweet peppers, different type, tomato cherries, ground cherries. We do zucchini too. I forget sometime what I grow, but c'est ça.
And you have a self-serve stand at your farm too. How has that been going?
That was a new project last year. We began that. Now it's our second year, and it's really good for people. Then they begin to work early, or they finish late in the day. They can pass for take the fruit and the veggies. Because we can keep the kiosk open all the days. So it's services for the close community.
And for this summer, is your U-pick still open for any longer?
It's gonna close this weekend, so it's gonna be maybe the last weekend. I'm not sure because it's like a competition with the people. They do U-pick and the birds. The birds can eat a lot of fruit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, let's hope that the people get to them before the birds do. Thank you so much. This has been such a fun interview. I feel like I've learned so much. I really appreciate it.
that was a pleasure to answer you for the question.
I hope you have a great rest of your day. Ferme Giroflée has officially now closed their U-Pick for their 2025 season. However, they are having a 10% off sale when you buy 10 blueberry plants, and that is a back-to-school sale that is on until September 30th. So take advantage of that while you can, and they'll see you at their U-Pick next year.
And now we're going to have a few news briefs about the agriculture and agri-food sector to keep you up to date on happenings in the sector. In Quebec, there's a new face at the head of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. MNA Donald Martel has taken over from André Lamontagne, who has announced he won't be running for re-election in 2026. Lamontagne had been the minister since 2018. Martel has represented the Coalition Avenir Québec in the riding of Nicolas Bécancourt since 2012. While in opposition, he served as the CAC spokesperson on the agriculture portfolio, so he's familiar with the issues at hand and sat on several related committees at the National Assembly. Prior to his election, Donald Martel had a career in municipal government. Among other positions, he served as Director General and Secretary-Treasurer of the MRC Nicolet Yamaska from 1994 to 2012. Quebec's agri-food sector packed a serious economic punch in 2024, generating $527 billion in economic activity. That's roughly 10% of the province's total GDP. The biggest slice of that pie is for bars and restaurants, which make up 44% of the sector. In comparison, agriculture represents the smallest share at just 11%. The rest comes from food processing, wholesale, and retail operations. But even with that smaller slice, agriculture plays a critical role since Quebec produces about half the food it consumes. The rest is mostly imported from elsewhere in Canada and the US. Local agricultural production directly supports over $210 billion in added value economic activity. That's about 4% of Quebec's entire economy, more than the forestry sector and nearly on par with transportation. Quebec is doubling down on its support for the next generation of farmers. The province's Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, known as MAPAC, has announced the renewal of its Farm Succession and Entrepreneurship Program, officially called Relève Agricole and Entrepreneuriat, or IMRA. With a fresh $11 million budget, the program will run through to the spring of 2027 and includes two calls for projects, one in 2025 and another in 2026. The La Relève program aims to help young farmers get established through startups, grants, farm acquisitions, or business transfers. This initiative is part of MAPAC's broader 2025 to 2035 biofood policy, Feeding Our Ambitions, which was recently announced earlier in the year. This renewed program builds on past success. In the last 2 years alone, IMRA distributed more than $16 million to support over 850 agricultural projects across Quebec. Applications for the next round open on October 15th, 2025, and close January 31st, 2026, or if the funds run out, it'll be earlier. So get your applications in early. Each applicant can receive up to $25,000, covering up to half of eligible expenses. And finally, a hot, dry summer is taking a toll on more than just major crops like corn and soybeans. Pumpkins are now feeling the impact too. Across southern Quebec, it's been generally dry since June, with many areas receiving only half the typical rainfall. That's bad news for pumpkins and squash, which need 25 to 50 millimeters of water per week during the growing season, especially during flowering and fruit set. These crops may be mostly ornamental, with demand peaking around Halloween, of course, but they're grown at scale for the retail market. And unlike smaller garden plots, large commercial fields can't rely just on drip irrigation systems, which are ideal for pumpkins because they help prevent fungal infections. The result, farmers say this year's pumpkins and squash will likely be smaller and yields lower, meaning they could be harder to find or more expensive as autumn rolls on. That's the news briefs for this week.
Thank you for joining us for the launch of the Farm to Food podcast. We'll have lots more about farming and all things agri-food in the coming months. We'd like to thank our sponsors for helping bring this initiative to life, the Livestock Breeders Association for the studio facilities at the Expo Ormstown Fairgrounds, and Quinn Farm in Notre-Dame-de-Île-Perrot for promotional support.
We'd also like to thank the Community Media Strategic Support Fund and the Government of Canada for their financial support to produce this program, as well as the Bourses d'initiative on entrepreneuriat collectif for their contribution to equip the podcast studio. This program is also made possible by the volunteer directors on the board of the Châteauguay Valley Community Information Services, a non-profit social enterprise with charitable status. So please support these efforts by making a tax-deductible donation at farm-to-food.ca.
This first Farm to Food podcast has been made possible by the hard work and creative effort of the following people at The Gleaner. Hugh Maynard, publisher. Jackie Rourke, associate publisher. Sarah Rennie, news editor. Chantal Hortop, managing editor. Erica Taylor, copy editor. Stacey Pennington, audio production. Dianna Chycki, sales and marketing. Jose Maynard, office manager. Gail Elliott, administration. And myself, Callan Forrester, reporter.
And, of course, Farmer Phil, we'd like to thank him. He'll be back in 2 weeks on October 1st as part of our second Farm to Food podcast with lots of interesting stories on the topic of farm to table, the journey of food from the land to the kitchen. Join us then.